Hello everyone, and welcome to 1v1 with Boss Rush Games. I'm your host, Celeste Roberts. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing one of the founders of Cobblepath Games, a company specializing in tabletop role-playing games. I am interviewing Jack today.
Hello.
Thank you so much for making time. You are 6 hours ahead, so thank you for accommodating everything with this interview.
No problem.
Well, your name on Twitter is Teacupping, so you must be a big fan of tea.
Oh yeah, but I'm British, so.
What's your favorite kind? Do you have any recommendations?
So English breakfast is the standard because it's just what we call tea over here. But I'm also a big fan of Lapsang Souchong, which I'm aware is apparently like a really ill-informed tea choice, but it tastes like campfire smell, and I like camping, so I recommend it. It's good.
Ooh, that's a beautiful way to describe that. I want to try it now because I like campfires.
It's worth a try. It's really nice. It's good tea.
So Jack, how did we even connect? I think we just found ourselves through Twitter and following each other's endeavors and everything.
Yeah, I think it might have been through Zelda stuff.
Probably.
Because I made a Zelda RPG that you can get, which is not really what I'm talking about today. but I made one. It's on itch. Go check it out. It's half done. It's not even half done. It's a work in progress. But yeah, like I'm vaguely involved with the Zelda community. Vaguely-ish. I follow a few people and I sort of pay vague attention to what's going on, and I took part in the Zelda Creator Con last year and stuff. So I think that was how we ended up following each other on Twitter, probably. But yeah, it's a Twitter connection, I think.
Yes, so. And you had mentioned that you have some games coming out around this time, so I thought, well, I want to talk to him about it, and I'm really excited because I don't know too much about tabletop role-playing games. So this is like sitting in a lecture hall where the professor is going to educate me.
Or tall order, although I was a teacher for 5 years, so I guess kind of back to that life.
Wow. So you want to tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Jack, or T Crusading, or T Crusader, in various places. I'm one half of Cobblepath Games, the other half is Steph Williamson, but she is not quite so interested in being the public face of the company, so here I am talking to people. I am a game designer. I'm primarily the game designer for Cobblepath Games. Steph is primarily the writer. We kind of share a bit of both, but that's our main roles. I taught game art and game design for 5 years. And then March last year, I stepped away from being a teacher for a variety of reasons. And then the pandemic hit. In England, and the lockdown started, and we were aware of it before then, but it didn't really hit until about 2 weeks after I left my job. So my plan to leave my job, have a few weeks out to just kind of like chill and get my life in order, and then start applying for jobs to change career, kind of changed pretty quickly. And we were kind of gearing up at that time to do a Kickstarter for the game that we have in fact released literally today, which is the 6th of February, which is Locus, which me and Steph have been writing for, it's about 7 years now, I think.
7 years?
Yeah,
wow.
It was in development for about 7 years. Not constantly, but we both worked full time, so it's just, we were developing it for about 7 years. And we were gearing up for the Kickstarter. And then when I realised that I probably wasn't going to be changing careers and getting a new job anytime soon, I sort of figured, well, I might as well spend a few months kind of going at this and building this up a little bit. Take this Kickstarter a little more seriously than we were going to originally take it. I think originally we were kind of thinking we just kind of like throw it up, see how it went, and if it didn't succeed, no real worries. We've still had it for free out there and stuff. But then I figured, oh, let's take it seriously. So we got ourselves a Kickstarter. What's the word? Like an advisor. Who, if you're doing your first Kickstarter, get an advisor. It is so useful. It is just absolute gold. Absolutely recommend it. Ours was Trinity Knot Studios. There's a plug for you. Have those because they're worth it. So we got an advisor and we put off the Kickstarter for a couple more months, and we built up a little bit more of a Twitter following, and I started using social media a little bit more actively and stuff. And then we kind of did it, and we earned just over 200% of our of our goal, and we've been developing it for a few months. We've, as I said, released it today. We've still got to do printing, and we've got to make a couple of things, but we've got a lot of stuff coming up as well. And this is kind of now my attempt at a full-time job. So now I'm like a full-time TTRPG designer, which was never really the plan, but it is now.
Well, congratulations. Congratulations. Yeah, that's outstanding. And you're just lighting up about this.
It's been 2020 wasn't great, but there was a pretty chunky silver lining for myself. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to say that there was a pretty chunky silver lining for me. So yeah, like, and going into 2021, it's like there's a lot of stuff to do and a lot of like things for the future. So fingers crossed that's sort of a good omen.
I really hope that things can start opening up again so that you can go to different conventions and help promote your company.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm not entirely certain that's going to happen anytime soon in the UK. But we will see. I know that there's some digital conventions planned for this year, and I've got my finger on the pulse this year a little bit more with conventions. Last year I wasn't really part of the TTRPG community until last year. I played them. I obviously was making Locus for several years, and I've been playing them for years, and I've been like tinkering and making hacks and stuff for years and years and years. But I've never really joined the community. I've never really talked to many people outside of my own personal social circle about it. So getting on and like finding out about things like the award ceremonies that happen, and the just big variety of events and stuff, and like the community that's around itch, and the really awesome community for it that's on Twitter as well, actually, and all that sort of stuff has been something that I'm only now getting to grips with, I think. So but yeah, it's been an interesting learning experience getting involved in that side of things.
You're making me think, okay, you're talking about conventions, talking about Twitter. And of course, barring COVID and a pandemic, I know that a lot of cities, and I'm assuming in your neck of the woods as well, there are these game shops where people gather to play tabletop games together, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We actually have one of the most famous ones in the UK in Bristol.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called Excelsior. It was one of Stanley's favourite. Apparently, he visited it several times. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a really good little store. Obviously, I have the luxury of not having to leave the house at all, which a lot of people still don't have. Both of my housemates are actually key workers, so they have to go into work every couple of weeks. So I'm trying to do the sensible thing and basically completely limit as much as I can going out at the moment, at least. One of my housemates is fortunately works for the NHS and has got a vaccine already, so she's okay. That's Steph, the other half of Cobblepath. So she's good. But being where I am, I've got the luxury of staying home. But definitely, I've got one board game store in Bristol wants to take physical copies of Locus when we have them. And I've promised them a few to put on the shelves, and I need to talk to Excelsior, which is the other one. But yeah, there is a community in Bristol, and I have learned that there's actually about 4 or 5 TTRPG creators in Bristol. Yeah, but like all of them have done like Kickstarters in the last year or so. I don't know if you've heard of Inspiriles.
No, tell me more.
It's not by us, but it's a tabletop RPG built to teach people sign language.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
such an awesome idea. They're in Bristol, which is really cool. So I think when things open up a little bit more, there's probably at the very least going to be a sort of Bristol tabletop community drinks where we all go down the pub and have a pint or something. Because yeah, there's a few of us now, and it's going to be really good to sort of like actually be able to meet people. Um,
That's awesome.
and yeah, it's a good city for it actually, surprisingly.
Have you lived in Bristol your whole life?
No, moved here after uni. Um, Moved around a fair bit. I come from the south of England originally, though my mother is Scottish, and sort of then when I left for uni, went up to the Midlands. I keep getting told it's not the North. I'm not allowed to call it the North. Stoke-on, which to me is the North and is apparently the gateway to the North, but I'm told by a lot of people is not the North of England, it's the Midlands. So I went to Stoke-on-Trent for 3 years for uni, although I went to Bournemouth first for a year for uni to get a foundation course, and then I went to Stoke-on-Trent. And after Stoke-on-Trent, I moved back with my parents for a year, while my current two housemates spent some time getting money up and stuff. And then the three of us moved to Bristol, and we've hopped between on our third house. Yes, third house in Bristol now, together, which has been about 6 years. We were friends from uni, so yeah, we ended up in Bristol pretty much because it's near Steph's family, and me and my other housemate didn't really care how far from our family we were because we were happy to travel. So we decided Bristol because it looked kind of like a nice city, and we just ended up here. And it is a really nice city. Totally recommend it.
And now it sounds like you have a community you can interact with once things are safer. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah, it's great. I think Bristol's going to be a bit of a thing, hopefully, in the English TTRPG community in the coming years, I guess. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I mean, just for the sort of the concept, Inspirals deserves to do really well as far as I'm concerned. But we'll see how it goes. And I'd like to think Locus is pretty good. I'm pretty proud of it. So, but, time will tell.
Oh, well, I'm so excited for you. And let's rewind. I want to know, what is a tabletop RPG? And there could be listeners who are wondering the same thing.
Fair play. So the quick, dirty, awkward answer is, if you know what D&D is, it's that, but D&D isn't all of it. The actual proper answer is, so it's kind of complex, but it's basically like improv acting with people around the table, but with a rule set.
Okay.
So the idea is you play. There's lots and lots of different variations, especially in recent years, where there's been far more of a kind of ability for indie devs to release stuff and get it out there. There's always been that in the community. It's actually been a very kind of like indie-led sort of field, but in recent years with digital platforms and things like itch.io sort of hosting tabletop RPGs now and things, there's been a lot more of a push that indie devs can kind of like get their stuff out there. So there's a lot of ways that don't fall into the default, but the default version is you generally have a storyteller, or a dungeon master is the D&D term for it. Storyteller is a little bit more of a generic term. There's lots of different versions of it. Who kind of directs and sets the scenes, and then you have a bunch of players, anywhere between one and however many you want, typically around about 4 or 5, maybe 3. Is like a standard for most RPGs, but it does depend on the game. And each of the players tend to play a single character, and their characters will have stats, generally represented on a physical paper sheet, but not always. Kind of like, if you're not familiar with TTRPGs, kind of like any sort of like RPG, like Skyrim or something, or something that actually has actual character stats that mean something in it, like the older Fallouts or Outer Worlds, or sort of like a lot like Western RPGs tend to be fairly heavily cribbing on tabletop RPGs ultimately, but not these days, not directly. In that it's kind of like a lineage thing. Like a lot of modern games are based on older games, but the older games, a lot of them are actually based on tabletop RPGs. Like, for example, the original Fallout game was supposed to be specifically a game built on GURPS, which is a tabletop RPG game. Not one I'd recommend, not my thing. Not a fan of GURPS, but some people really like GURPS. It's a taste thing, but yeah, originally, like the original Fallout was based on, like, directly was supposed to use the systems from a tabletop RPG. Something happened with the licensing. I'm not actually familiar fully with the story, but they ended up not using it. But it's fairly heavily based on that sort of idea. But basically, you have a character, you have some sort of mechanical identity for the character. Depending on the RPG, depends on how dense or complex that character identity is mechanically. And then you basically kind of improv act in reaction to what the storyteller says is the default. As I say, there's tons of other ways that it works. Like, there's a big thing of journaling games these days, which kind of are a subset, which are generally played alone, and they're kind of more about writing a story to yourself, or as the name would suggest, like you write a journal based on prompts that you get generated by the game. Or you build a character and then you write prompts as that character and stuff. Not something I'm hugely familiar with, kind of something I only really properly learned about last year, and I haven't had the chance to play or read. I haven't played any of them, and I've only read a few, and I've got a couple that I want to do, but I am busy. But like, yeah, it's a really vibrant, crazy field. But what a tabletop RPG is functionally it's a role-playing experience that you play with a sort of physical set. Often they use dice, not always. Some of them use decks of cards, some of them use Jenga, which is a bit nuts.
Really? Like the little tower?
Yeah.
Jenga? Oh, wow.
So it started with, I think, the Dread RPG. I don't know if it was the first, but it was, as far as I'm aware, it's the first big one. Like, it's the first sort of like really sort of open, lots of people knew about it RPG to use Jenga. I don't actually know how it works. I haven't had the chance to read it, but I know it uses Jenga, and I know that a bunch of indies have done some really cool stuff with a Jenga system now. I'm aware of a system called Wretched and Alone. Which is a really small, as far as I'm aware, like it's a zine scale Jenga-based horror RPG that at some point I will get the chance to properly pick up, because I know it's got a really vibrant, active community around it that makes their own version, like their own stories out of the system and stuff. And the guy that makes it, who is Chris Bissett, I think. I'm bad with names, but he is incredibly talented and really cool, and he's got a Patreon. If sort of like checking out cool, weird indie games and horror and stuff, totally check out Wretched and Alone. Like, hunt him down. He posts a lot of good stuff on Twitter. He's awesome. Wow, I am not plugging myself at all. I'm plugging other people constantly. This is great.
You get the whole interview, though, right?
Yeah. I've got the whole interview, so it's fine. But yeah, like, absolutely, totally check him out. If you want to see some sort of weirder, smaller scale, usually solo games, there's someone I know called Starshine, who's a British TTRPG person. They've got a itch, and their games are like just really interesting and really weird and really different. And I don't think I've heard a single title for one of their games that hasn't made me either laugh or go, "That's genius." They've got games like what was there was a recent one that was, this game takes place in a Walmart
Oh my
Parking, I think
God.
it was.
The
Like, and it's, yeah,
Walmart.
it might not have been Walmart. I don't think it was Walmart. It might have been like Asda or something. Um, but it is basically this game takes place in a supermarket um, parking lot, and that's the name of the game, and it just makes me laugh. I just think that's genius, and they're all really small games. So yeah, absolutely check out Starshine as well. There, I could plug so many people. I need to stop plugging people. But yeah,
Oh, where?
Intertrials, Wretched Alone, Starshine, they're all great. Trinity Knot Studios really helped me out with the Kickstarter. Yeah. So
What?
yeah, there's a really cool community. Um, and Twitter is a very good place to connect with it, I have found. So
That's awesome. I
yeah.
love seeing people build one another up because just because you light someone else's candle does not diminish your own flame.
Yeah. Like I don't see any cost to us plugging other people's work that we think looks cool. Um, like we don't always have the money to back everybody's Kickstarter, but if I see something that I think people will like, I will try to make sure that I highlight it as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just good. Like there's so much awesome stuff out there, and someone's gonna like it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a lot. It's the community on Twitter at least is really awesome for the most part. There's some very very cool stuff that I've seen people make, and I'm very excited to get my hands on and/or get the time to read because I have got my hands on it and haven't had the time to read it yet. So yeah, um, yeah, like
I'm so excited. That makes me so happy because it's really easy to get lost in our responsibilities and jobs and our families, obligations, whatever you have. And I think it's really important to embrace your passions and have projects and have hobbies.
yeah, I completely agree. I can't. I get quite a lot of disquiet if I don't have something to be developing in the back of my mind. Um, Especially something that I don't have a deadline for because it means that if I am too busy to do it, it doesn't really matter. I have a couple of games at the moment that are that for me. Yeah, I even when like I was a teacher, I needed to have a project, at least one, usually many more.
Yeah, because it's probably a great way. Well, for me, and I'm sure the same for you, anybody who has some kind of hobby or outlet, it's a great way to, I don't know if let off steam is the right term, but it's really easy to have tunnel vision whenever you're
Yeah,
focused on work and you don't have an outlet to express yourself creatively.
yeah. It gives you a good kind of like boundary, I guess, to kind of like shift into a different mode every so often, and not always be doing that all the time just because it's busy. It's quite easy to just get absorbed by whatever is the biggest thing in your life. And it's quite nice to have like something that you can just kind of go, actually, I haven't done that for a while. I should do some of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really healthy because I'm like you. If I'm not working on something or having some kind of creative outlet, I get very grumpy,
Yeah. Yeah.
very
Yeah.
stressed. But what are some of your earliest memories of playing tabletop RPGs?
So I actually started really late for compared to most tabletop RPG players, I think. The Technically my earliest memories to do with tabletop RPG were one that kind of wasn't to do with tabletop RPG was a friend randomly brought a flyer for a LARP system to me, like the character sheet for a LARP system, and we kind of looked at it and talked about it a little bit. We never went. Um, Funny though, because I did end up actually going to that LARP for 5, 6 years later in my life, completely unrelated. But that was a thing. But then also when I was younger, I bought the starter set for D&D 3.5, and then never played it because I never had any friends who wanted to play. So I never played it at all, ever. I've still never played it. I have not used
No.
it. It's somewhere in a cupboard, somewhere in my stuff. I've never played that starter set. And then when I was at college, which is the high school equivalent for Americans, I started playing an MMO online, one called Dofus, which most people probably haven't heard of. I think it's great, but it's not everyone's cup of tea because it's like turn-based. But regardless, I was playing that, and I met a lot of friends on there in other countries, and some of the friends I met a couple who were in the Netherlands, and they invited me to their wedding. So I went to their wedding in the Netherlands, and during the sort of like 5 or so days I was there, they had a tabletop session with their friend, their like sort of weekly one, and they said I could sit in, and I was like, oh yeah, please, I'd really like to, because I spent a lot of time at theirs reading some of the tabletop books they had, and they were playing Aberrant, which is a White Wolf superhero system from back in the day. That's I actually have it now because I picked it up for nostalgia purposes about 2 years ago, but I haven't properly read through it in ages, so I can't really talk about how it works. But they were playing that, but they weren't playing superheroes. They were playing like D&D fantasy style characters. And we did one session, and I played a really grumpy fairy, and it was a load of fun. And I think what's interesting to me is the fact that in that session that we played, I rolled dice once, which is like not what you think is going to happen with a TTRPG usually. Like the stereotype is that you're rolling for like everything. And I think that can be true with certain systems. Depends on the DM, depends on like the kind of session you're doing. But it was kind of interesting to me that my first ever experience actually playing a tabletop RPG, I rolled the dice once. And it was a bonza roll. It was ridiculous. I got like 18 successes on like 13 dice or something stupid. But I think that's made an impression on the way I design. Like I'm not super rules light. I don't actually play or design super rules light stuff, but I think it has left me with a thing of the fact the sort of inherent knowledge that the roles are a tool rather than the entirety of the game. But yeah, that was like my first introduction to it, and then I went to uni and we started playing. Like I made friends who wanted to play, and we started playing stuff. White Wolf primarily, World of Darkness, and our own janky hack games primarily based on World of Darkness. So yeah, like I don't actually think I played an actual World of Darkness setting like Vampire or Werewolf. I don't think I played any of them until after I left uni, funnily enough, but we played for like several years at uni. So yeah, those are kind of like that. Those were my beginnings in the field. In terms of tabletop RPG specifically, but board games and video games have been much longer pedigree with me.
So do you have time to even play video games as much anymore?
Oh, I make time.
Good.
It's my cool. It's both my cool down and just a thing that I do quite a lot. Like it's always been a thing. I taught games for 5 years. And students don't want to learn TTRPG, so I was teaching video games for the most part. So yeah, like gaming is a big thing, partly because of research purposes. Like it's good to indulge and know, but also because it's a good pastime, especially at the moment.
So what are some of your favorite games? Obviously Zelda, right?
Oh, that's so difficult, but yes, Skyward Sword is one of my favorite games. Skyward Sword was my favorite until Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is now my favorite Zelda. But yeah, just the Zelda series in general, just fantastic. Pretty much anything Nintendo makes, like they pretty much haven't made a dud for me. Metroid's a big deal, like particularly the Prime series. I really like the Metroid Prime games, and I'm super hyped that they're making a fourth one. Yes,
nice.
And that Retro's making it. Yes. In recent years, some of my favorite games have been Hollow Knight. I think Hollow Knight is just like definitely a top 10 of all time for me. It is I really like the Dark Souls series. Hollow Knight is like my personal perfect version of the Dark Souls series. It has all the stuff I really like about the Dark Souls series, and none of the stuff I really don't like about the Dark Souls series. All put together with a lot of like aesthetic choices that I really love, and just absolutely amazing music. And I totally recommend it. It's a masterpiece of a game. It was my favorite game of 2020 because it came out on Steam really late 2019, so it missed some of the Game Awards and missed it was really muddy. It was in the Steam's 2020 Game Awards, but everyone else's 2019 Game Awards. But Outer Wilds, not the Outer Worlds, Outer Wilds. I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like a puzzle exploration game. It is like nothing I have ever played. It is one of the most clever games I've ever played, but I also didn't expect it to be as emotionally touching as it is, especially at the ending. Like, the ending is beautiful and amazing, and it is just an absolutely fantastic game. It's not that expensive. I think it's like £20 standard, and it frequently goes on sale for like 12. If you like video games that aren't just the standard AAA style video game, and you like seeing what games can do and what they can be, I cannot recommend Outer Wilds enough. I will not say anything more about it because it's absolutely a game you should just go into blind. And I don't normally say that, but it just so is, and it's so good, and people should check it out because I have never played a game that has wowed me so much, I think. So yeah, that's a fairly recent one that I totally suggest everybody go and check out. It's awesome. Some older stuff. So Final Fantasy, specifically Final Fantasy 9, which I am actually wearing a t-shirt for by happenstance.
Oh, cool.
Evie, he's the best character. 9 is the best one, and if you think one of the others is the best one, then you are entitled to your incorrect opinion. I really like 9. It's really good. I think the cast of characters is great, but Final Fantasy in general, just nearly all of them are great. There's some that I'm not a massive fan of, but yeah, good series. Horror games, since released a horror tabletop RPG today, that's pretty much mostly inspired by my experience with horror video games. Also horror films, but not really by horror tabletop RPGs, because there aren't that many mainstream ones out there. There's quite a lot of really cool indie ones, but not that many mainstream ones, and I didn't really become aware of the indie TTRPG scene properly until like this year or last year, not 2021, 2020. And we started developing Locust like 7 years ago, so I didn't really have that background back then. Since that's inspired by my experience with horror games, I should probably mention some of my favorite horror games. So Resident Evil Remake, the first remake.
So good.
Yeah, the one that was on the GameCube originally.
Mm-hmm.
Just masterful. Absolutely fantastic horror game. Yeah, the best remake that they've done. The best Resi game. I do like a lot of the others, but the one remake is so good, and it is probably the best made horror game I have ever played, I think. That doesn't mean it's the scariest. It doesn't mean it's the best horror game, but I think it is the best made. Like, the craft involved with how it's been put together is really good. The way the systems interact with the horror is great. The resource management is really tightly controlled in an excellent way. The static cameras, I know people don't like tank controls, but you're not really supposed to like playing a horror game on like a base level, on some level. So you can put up with the tank controls, and the tank controls allow you to have set camera angles that do so much more than like an over-the-shoulder free roam camera does. The Resi 2 remake was really quite good, but it wasn't scary for me at all. But the Resi 1 remake is scary. There are specific points in that game that are just terrifying. What else is a good horror game that I really like? The Fatal Frame or Project Zero series are really good. The second one in particular is the one that really got with me. Twin Butterflies, I think. I think it's Twin Butterflies.
Crimson Butterfly?
Crimson Butterflies.
I think it's
yes.
Crimson Butterfly.
Yeah, it's Crimson Butterflies. That's a really good one. But overall, my favorite ever horror game is Forbidden Siren. I don't know if you know it. It's weirdly obscure. It's a obscure Japanese PS2 horror game. I'm not sure it ever actually got widely released in the US. I think it saw a relatively wide UK and EU release. I could be wrong on that. It's originally called just Siren in Japan, but it's called Forbidden Siren in at least the EU. It is really janky in a number of ways, but it's one of those games where the jank really helps.
It looks spooky.
It is honestly the scariest game I've ever played. I think it is the scariest game I've ever played. I literally 2 days ago sat down and started replaying it because I found out it's on the PS Store, on PS4 at least. I don't know if it's on PS5 because we don't have one, but it's on the PS Store at the moment. It was on sale 2 days ago. I don't know if it still is, in the UK at least. So it was like £3, £4. Get it if you like horror games. It's brilliant. It's better than anything that's been released in the last 15 years, honestly. It's janky, but the jank helps. It has so much atmosphere. So they've done this really horrible thing with the faces. So all the faces are real voice actors. Real actors have done all the faces, but they've done them as freeze frames that kind of fade between when they talk and make expressions. It is super uncanny and absolutely horrible and works so well for a horror game. It's fantastic.
I'm looking at it right now, just images, and it looks terrifying.
If you see Locust, we replaying it 2 days ago, we were playing it and we were like, oh wow, this really made it into Locust. The visual DNA of Siren really made it into Locust. We can see it in how we directed our graphic artist and in our original things. We're just oh yeah, this is we hadn't really realized how much of a visual inspiration that game has been specifically. But it does so many clever things, so many clever things with how it works. It has got a sequel. The sequel is still good, but nowhere near as good as the first. But it does. I could spend 2 hours talking about how awesome Forbidden Siren is. I won't, but if you like horror games, I so recommend getting it. It's the scariest thing I've ever played, and it's not. I'm very picky with my horror. I'm incredibly picky with my horror, both films and games. I have not really found a horror game in the last 15 years that I've actually thought was scary and good. I found a few that were good, but weren't scary, and none that I thought were good and scary, and none that I thought were scary but not good. Very few. Yeah, Amnesia was very good, and it did some very clever things, and then the games industry went, great, we'll take that, but we'll do none of the clever things. We'll just do all the obvious things that were not the reasons why it was good. And it bothers me.
Did you play Soma?
I thought Soma was a really good sci-fi game with a horror flavor that didn't scare me once.
Mm-hmm.
As a sci-fi story with some really disquieting themes, amazing. Really cool. But considering that it was made by the Amnesia guys and it was sold as a horror game, I didn't think it was scary at all. Nothing in the gameplay made it scarier. All the fear in that game would have worked just as well in a book or in a film, the game did not enhance the fear at all. I think is kind of my take from it. I thought it was really cool. I think it's very telling that somebody created a mod that was overwhelmingly popular that removed all the danger from the enemies, that it got made into an official patch
Safe
as an
mode.
option for the game. Yeah, like I think it's very telling that supposedly a horror game can survive that patch and still be considered really good. Because I'm totally down for like more accessibility in games. I'm one of the horrible heathens who thinks Dark Souls would benefit from an easy mode. Not because I want to play it, but it wouldn't affect me if it was in the game, so I don't care. But I think if a horror game can take out the scary and still function, then the bit that you took out probably wasn't worth having in, or probably wasn't doing its job right at the very least. So like, yeah, Soma really disappointed me on first play because I was wanting and expecting a horror game. But I do think it is a really awesome sci-fi story that tells that does go into some really creepy, scary ideas, but it just doesn't really use the game to do any of it, I think. Which is a shame, because Amnesia did actually use the game to create fear, and it's literally the only horror game I've ever played that doesn't have combat that I found remotely scary. Because it does stuff to mitigate the fact it doesn't have combat. And I think that combat in horror games is really important, and I think that removing it does way more harm than good to how scary a game is, at least for what I find scary. I have a lot of thoughts on this because, I spent 7 years developing a horror TTRPG, so I've thought about horror games quite a lot. But yeah, like I think you can make a scary game without combat. Amnesia did it. I think the first Penumbra didn't really have combat, or was it the second? Those guys made 3 Penumbra games beforehand, and the first 2 were really good, and the third one was kind of good, but wasn't a horror game. But I'm pretty sure one of the first 2 that were still firmly horror games didn't have combat. But if they didn't have combat, they were pretty scary as well. So, it's doable. It's just not... I don't think it's optimal. Like, I thought Outlast sucked. I know a lot of people really like Outlast. I thought it was crap. It just wasn't scary. I was just like, okay, I can understand how this game works. Oh, these dudes aren't going to attack me. Cool, I'll walk through this room. I am not scared because I don't. And I find it that when an enemy sort of like pops out and goes, blah, I'm here, and you can't. If I don't have the option to fight them, it's not scary for me because I know what I'm doing. I can't make a wrong decision, really. I just know I'm running. And like the actual, like the decision that I've made, the choice that I have made is already made for me. I know I'm running. Now, there are micro choices within that where I might turn left rather than right or whatever, and he might catch me. But like most of these games have insta-death when I get caught anyway. So like, it feels like it's not really my decision that got me caught there. Whereas like stuff like Resi Remake, where you can fight the zombies, but there are tactical reasons to not kill every zombie in the game because they turn into Crimson Heads, which are horrific, and a stroke of design genius. Like you fight a zombie and you're sitting there, and after you've killed it, like the scary bit is not when you're fighting the zombie. The scary bit is the just before you're fighting the zombie where you're going, oh god, should I kill this one or not? And the bit after where you go, oh god, should I have killed that one or not? Or should I have run away from that one or not? Like, killing it gets it out of the way, but it uses ammo. And if you use too much ammo, you might not have ammo for that thing around the corner. And that, to me, is way scarier than, dude found me in the closet and now I have to run past him. Oh no. Like, no, my brand of horror is very centered on player mistakes being tangible and like the characters being responsible for stuff being where the fear comes from. Like ramifications for actions are scary in a great like it encourages us to kind of comprehend the ramifications for our actions and consider them and take responsibility for them as well. Like I think that's an important thing. I can go into how that kind of factors into Locus potentially, because it's a big thing in Locus.
I want to talk about let's go.
Yeah,
Let's
okay.
let's segue to Locus. Now this
Yeah.
this is Cobblepath Games' latest game, right? Is it the first game or is it the latest?
It was our first game because we released it as a version 0 about November 2019.
Okay.
And it was out for about 9 months before we put it on Kickstarter. And the version 0 was an unedited, because we couldn't afford an editor, not properly laid out because we couldn't afford a layout person or any of the software to do layout with. So it was like a sort of like beta version of it, really. I mean, it was fully tested and pretty much fully designed at that point. Like we designed everything, and I don't think we changed anything since then to the Kickstarter design-wise. But the actual like document was really rough and ready. And then we released another small game that's pay what you want / free, suggested price 50p. That's a 1-page game about being essentially a Power Ranger.
Cool.
Power Ranger. It's called Gemstone Warriors. It's stupid. It's silly. It's very very rules light. It might not properly work, but it's free. It's on drive-thru. You can go check it out. I don't really want to. I don't talk about it much because I literally put it together in a weekend and just went, "Oh, this is kind of fun. Let's put it out." Because I put it out before we were really taking this properly seriously and stuff. And I will probably go back to it and revise it at some point, but it's not priority. So yeah, it was our first, but the new one's technically our second, technically. But it is what we would describe as our flagship game. It's our big kind of like, we exist, this is our sort of like statement that we exist sort of game. And it is a personal horror tabletop RPG. It is made to be scary. We felt that back when we started making it, we were only really aware of, say, Call of Cthulhu, which is ostensibly a horror game, and sort of the World of Darkness series, which are not really horror, but kind of horror themed, but they're not really built to be horror games in the same way that we're thinking horror, at least. And we kind of felt that, one, there was totally space for some actual horror that wasn't Lovecraftian, because that's kind of like really dominant in TTRPGs for some reason. I guess it's just because there's a lot of it in D&D. D&D is like overwhelmingly dominant. But like Lovecraft stuff, Cthulhu mythos things are just all over the place. So we were like, let's make something that's not that, and let's make something that's actually built to be really genuinely scary, because me and Steph are both massive fans of horror. We really like horror games. We really like horror films. We like being scared. We know that that is something other people like. Maybe not huge amounts of other people on the grand scheme of things, but there are people who like horror. It is a thing. So we set out to make it, and we set out to make it based on sort of our own preferences. So it's inspired by a lot of our favourite video games and films. It's got a lot of inspiration from a lot of Eastern horror films and British horror, mostly because we're not like huge fans of the general brand of American horror. Like, there's actually a lot of good American horror films, but the sort of the standard style of American horror is kind of much more of the slasher gore kind of flavor. Not really what we were going for. We're more in the psychological ghosts. Neither of us are massively scared by stories where the dude next door has a chainsaw, but we are really scared of stories where there's a ghost in the cupboard that just kind of is horrifying, basically. And that's not saying that I wouldn't be scared of a guy running at me with a chainsaw. I absolutely would be terrified if a guy ran at me with a chainsaw, but there's a difference between real life and stories. But so it draws a lot of inspiration from a lot of those places, and it's very much more psychological and personal because of that. A lot of the places that we drew from are really about characters. I think something that a lot of people are probably going to say is that it's very Silent Hill.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's a particularly interesting one because, yes, it is. But Silent Hill was kind of not our trajectory. We just kind of ended up arriving at some of the same stuff because we were drawing on the same strands of horror, I think. Notable as well because I designed most of the mechanics. Steph wrote a lot, like most of the book, and a lot of the sort of like lore and especially like a lot of there's some like poetry throughout, and there's some really cool flavor stuff in there. That's for the greater part of it. Most of that is Steph, not me. But I did most of the sort of like the way the dice work and the cards work and stuff. I had not actually properly played a Silent Hill game before we started developing this. Silent Hill was not one of those things that I was like unaware of, but I just never really got the chance to play it when I was younger. So it's not really one of my formative horror games. I do think it's kind of awesome. People are probably going to think I'm not a real fan when I say that like 2's pretty much unequivocally the best one. I really like 3 as well, even if it does have that really stupid Shakespeare puzzle at the start that I hate. It needed outside of the game knowledge about a Shakespeare play I have never read.
Which one? Which one
Tempest,
is it?
The Tempest. There's a bunch.
Okay.
It's like there's a bunch of quotes from Shakespeare books, and you've got to match them up with stuff. Because I was playing on hard puzzles, and basically the information that you need to solve the puzzle isn't in the game.
Well, that's rotten.
It's really awful. It's just very poorly designed, and it was especially frustrating because like 3 of the 5 I had studied in school, and 2 of them I had literally never read and didn't even know the plots to when I first read it. So I was like, what am I supposed to do here? But yeah, like I like 3. 2 was pretty good. 4 I liked. I think it would have been better if they hadn't called it 4. If it had just been called Silent Hill: The Room and been a spin-off, people would have been really kind to it. And it would have been really appreciated for a lot of the weird stuff it was doing, but because it was like the 4th entry in this series, people didn't take kindly to it. But people are probably going to hate me when I say that I thought Downpour was genuinely pretty damn good. Like, Homecoming kind of sucked, but Downpour was pretty damn good. It had its flaws. It was not the best one, but it was pretty good. But yeah, so Locust is quite Silent Hill-y, but it kind of didn't arrive at it through us trying to make a Silent Hill game. We kind of just ended up with a lot of the same stuff coming in from the same, because we were pulling on the same inspirations as the guys that made Silent Hill. So the core design idea of Locust was, 1, it has to be scary. That was a starting point. We want it to be scary. 2, the bad guy is the place. That was kind of like our thematic setup. Was okay.
That's cool.
What's our kind of like default was okay. How about the place you're in is the bad guy? Like it is the thing that's against you. It's the monster. Cool. Okay. And that was really our starting point. Was those 2. Came up with a few other things like really early on we came up with the fact that characters have negative attributes rather than positive ones. So instead of say strength, you have frailty, and instead of dexterity, you have clumsiness. And they're not all 1-for-1s, but you've got things like temper and impatience, which was based on us kind of like looking through horror movies and going, characters in horror movies don't tend to succeed because of what they're good at. They tend to fail because of what they're bad at. Like, overarching, like, most characters in horror movies for the important plot beats tend to just be failing because they're bad at something. So we made it, yeah, the main things that you put about your character are what they're bad at and how bad they are at it. And that kind of flavored a lot of the system. And the other thing was that every character you play has done something. They have what we call a haunt, which is an event in their past that preys on them. As we put it, it weighs on their soul.
Okay, that's
And
cool.
yeah, like the whole game kind of revolves around that. So every character has to have done something. It
That is
doesn't.
scary.
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
scary.
And all of the horror is then built around that. So
Okay.
the director, which is our name for the dungeon master or the storyteller, we call them the director. Um, the director then builds all sorts of different things based on those haunts. And haunts can be like, they can be outright morally black, like you murdered a dude, but we haven't really outright said that people can't, but like all of our examples in the book have always been very much morally grey slash arguably morally white. Like a lot of characters' haunts that we've given examples of and we've shown have not been necessarily bad things that you would necessarily say a person is a bad person for doing, but there is something that they deem as a mistake or that weighs on them. And so one thing is that you don't actually have to be guilty either. Like you could have killed a dude and have not even feel sorry for it. But the fact that you murdered someone is still a haunt. It will still weigh on you. Even if you don't feel guilty, that stuff stains you in some way, at least in the world of Locus, and I would hope in the real world. So some examples are one of the characters in the book, one of the sample characters in the book, became an alcoholic at university and dropped out of university as a result. And his haunt is not that he was an alcoholic. His haunt was that he dropped out of uni and that he squandered his opportunity. Like, that's the core of his haunt. But there's a lot of imagery that would then theoretically be used by a director, potentially based around alcohol or bottles, but also around university and what his course was at uni and stuff. And these are the things that he will see when he's in game. Like, he will get past post-it notes that say that he sees on the wall a framed diploma with his name on it and stuff. Stuff like that. That's what Locus is built to do. And then further than that, there are the monsters. So the place is the monster. But when you are in one of these places, which we call a Malus Locus, when you're in a Malus Locus, it will feed on people's haunts, and from them, it will create monsters based on their haunts. So every character in Locus will have a custom monster that is based on their haunt.
Oh wow! So what is the meaning behind locust? Because not locust, everybody, not like the insect in the Bible, not locust.
That. It means placing in Latin. Is Latin? No, Greek. Sorry. Steph's the linguist. She's got a master's in classics, and she's really interested in linguistics and has done a lot of study into linguistics. So she's the language person. I am not the language person. She's probably going to hate that I don't immediately know this. My bad. Yeah, it's Greek. So it means place. The word locus just means place. So the name of the game is technically just place. It's based on, there is a concept in ancient Greek of a genius loci. And a genius loci is a spirit of a place. Specifically, it usually meant like an actual guardian spirit, like a nymph, that was like a tangible, sentient-esque being in mythology. We've kind of taken it a bit more general for the game, where places have personalities. Not every place has a personality, but places gain them. From use, from belief, from people treating them in certain ways. You will find, like, I think that all of us have been to somewhere where there has been an atmosphere to it. I'm trying to think of an example that I can give that's really obvious and easy.
Like
Um,
a like an alleyway, maybe? Like or
but yeah, like an alleyway, but more specific.
okay.
So, for example, I can't remember what it's called. There is a park in New York that I have been to that's
Central?
got no, not Central Park, but Central Park would totally be a genius loci. Central Park would totally be a genius loci. It's got the Arc de Triomphe um
Uh,
copy in it. It's
Bryant Park, Bowling Green, City Hall Park, DeWitt, Clinton Park.
I'm not going to remember the name. It's like a cross, and it's got a fountain in the middle, and it's like right next to one of the universities, and it's like super bustling.
Oh, Washington
Uh,
Square,
Probably yes.
because they have a Washington Square arch. It's
Yeah,
called
and
it.
it looks like the French Arc de
Yes.
Triomphe. Yes, that park. So I have been there, and it. So Washington Square, which I hope is something that at least some people who might watch this have been to, maybe. But I went there when I visited New York, and it has an atmosphere. It has a character, like a very particular kind of like character. Like a lot of churches have specific characters. Like you go in, you can feel the atmosphere to them. Um, and there's also like an element of like reputation to places. That's a genius loci.
Okay.
They are a
Okay.
generally good thing, but sometimes they go bad and they become what we call a malus locus. Now, this is entirely our thing. Like, this is not from Greek mythology anymore. Um, but a malus locus literally means bad place.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, so they become a bad place, and then they become these locations that you base a locus game in, where people get caught in them. So the characters don't generally have a relationship with the place before they go there. They might, but generally speaking, they don't have to. But because they've got a haunt, when they enter a malus locus, it kind of latches onto them and drags them into it and traps them there. And you have to figure out how to escape or solve problems and stuff. And malus locuses are, to put it very basically, they are essentially a genius loci that has gone through some trauma that has changed it. And the traumas are roughly analogous to the kind of trauma that a human would go through. So you've got stuff like abandoned places. An abandoned theme park can become a malus locus because it was meant to be a place of joy and bustling activity and excitement, and it is now not. And it has been left, and it is lonely. Like, so it becomes this other thing. It becomes this bad place. And when malus locus forms, it kind of reinforces its own existence in sort of really subtle ways. So like, and malus locus don't have to be abandoned. Like you can have them be like a little rundown town that just never seems to get any funding, that never seems to get any sort of like new development, doesn't seem
Okay.
to get up to date technology, because that sort of stuff is what the malus locus kind of like paperwork goes missing. Like building contractors succeed on their contracts, like so just stuff doesn't get built in the town because it's a malus locus. It kind of, the force of it kind of reinforces its own new existence as a malus locus, and it kind of retains that existence. So there's a whole load of elements about that, and like the kind of game has this kind of like through line of kind of like dealing with past events, be they trauma or just mistakes that you've made. And there's all sorts, and the whole thing is kind of built on a kind of design philosophy that allows you to do what you want with it. I've seen games say that they're super hackable, and I wouldn't really say that I designed Locus to be super hackable, because I never went out with the idea that Locus would be a particularly hackable game as much as I went out with the idea that it was best practice for this particular game to just make it kind of really malleable.
Mm-hmm.
So the book has one sample campaign in it that takes place on a crashed fishing ship. And the players play a crew of salvagers come to respond to a distress signal, basically. And it takes place on the ship. But you can do what you want with it. Like, the books are written under the assumption that you will generally be making your own content for it.
Okay.
And that's why sort of we don't have monsters listed in the book. There are monsters in the sample campaign pre-made for the characters and the events. There are 4 sample monsters, but there isn't like a list of monsters like there is in D&D, because we basically give a whole chapter over in the director's guide to this is how you make monsters. Like, you build them this way. These are the things, and they're really stat light, so they're not super hard to make mechanically, at least, and it's relatively easy to make them not particularly broken. So yeah, like it's built with this idea that you will make your own stuff.
Okay, so how long do these games usually last? Can they last just one sitting, weeks, months?
So usually, I think the average for a sort of what we would define as a normal size Locust campaign, which is bigger than the one in the source book and bigger than the one that we're releasing for Zine Quest. They're both what we would describe as small Locust campaigns. So a normal size Locust story would probably last about 3 sessions, I'd say, 3 sittings of 3-4 hours each. That's rough. It can take way less time. It can take way more time. It's tricky because it's a mystery game. And mystery games' time is very heavily based on how long it takes characters and players to really get their heads around how the mystery goes and what they need to do. We have some guidance for how to help players do that, because, you know, it's not the DM is not working, the director is not working against the players to hide the mystery. They are helping the players to tell the story of these characters discovering and either figuring out or not the mystery. But yeah, so we are attempting to write small campaign or small stories that can be done in a single sitting of, say, 4 or 5 hours, 3 hours maybe. But it's tricky to do with Locust. And we're still getting the balance right. I'm sure that there are people out there that could do it off the bat, like, easily. We are testing the waters and trying to make stuff that's a lot smaller. Our Zine Quest entry is trying something a bit different with the way we create Locust stories to make it quite small and condensed. You could do quite big campaigns with like really big locations, but the game is really built for kind of like smallish one-off stories that last a few sessions. It's not built for sort of long-haul, year-long campaigns. Because you know, it's difficult to do horror with characters that are really long-lived and like that you explore, and the game is very much about characters dealing with their haunts. So if you have a really long campaign, you either end up with them having their character arc and then just keeping going, or just kind of never resolving their character arc for ages and ages and ages, which is just a bit naff. And it's totally legit for a character in Locust to not resolve their character arc. But when they don't resolve their character arc for 3 sessions, and that's the end of their story, that's a story. Like, characters who don't resolve their arcs are characters. Like, you can make that decision. That can be a story in itself. But a character that doesn't resolve their character arc for 5 months of play and then kind of just develops over like the last month, that's just kind of naff. So it doesn't really work with the long haul too well. We do have some thoughts on how to, but I'm going to keep them close to my chest for now.
Some, what is it? What do they call that? Developers' secrets?
Yes, like future plans, potential future sort of projects that we might be bringing to Kickstarter if Lucas becomes enough of a thing to warrant it, which hopefully it will.
Awesome.
I mean, we succeeded in the first Kickstarter, so it's definitely something we're going to be bringing more stuff to Kickstarter for. going up forwards. But it's whether it becomes the next thing we do after our next game, or whether it becomes like something that we do sort of 2022 maybe. We have options depending on how things go.
That's
for the long
hey, that's awesome. Hey, you want to think long term, especially when you're wanting this to be your life, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we were talking earlier about always having projects.
Mm-hmm.
There are projects, and like some of them I really want to do, and I'm like, but I probably can't warrant doing that unless one of our previous projects does well enough because it's really big. And then there's other stuff that's like, but that's really small. And there's other stuff I'm doing with other people. And yeah, like there's a lot of variables to decide which one ends up getting bumped to the front. But yeah, as we were saying earlier, always got projects bubbling. There's always stuff. And there's quite a few at the moment.
That's incredible. Well, where can people find Locust? Should they find you on Twitter? What do you have a website where people can go and buy it?
So yes and yes. I'm on Twitter at tcrusading. Cobblepath Games is on Twitter at Cobblepath. We also have a website, cobblepathgames.co.uk, and you can buy Locust on itch.io. On our website is also a couple of extra resources. So there's a printing sheet that's available for free for like the game cards and and like the contents of the starting story. So like all the printables for the starting story are on our website, and also our open license for Locust. We'll want to check if they want to make things for Locust.
You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. So Locust has released on an open license. You may or may not be aware of open licenses. A bunch of fairly prominent TTRPGs like D&D have open licenses of some sort. What this basically means, there's a lot of legal jargon around it, so do not take what I'm saying here as the be-all and end-all of it. Please read the legal license before you know what you're doing. But basically, it means that people can make content for Locust. They can release it under their own name, get full credit for it, and get paid for it if they want to sell it for money without owing us any royalties.
Wow, that's generous.
So it's relatively standard in TTRPGs. I say relatively standard. There's a lot of games that don't do it. There's a couple that do. D&D does it, and then there's a lot of funny stuff about how the D&D one works with like DM's Guild and stuff, and DM's Guild taking a massive cut and things. But basically, yeah, we thought, well, we want people to make for it. It's kind of designed for people to make their own stories. At the end of the day, we aren't going to be able to make like the volume that people might want in pre-writs, and we've come to realize that actually having pre-written stories, Locust is a really good system for pre-written stories. So having people making them, awesome. And yeah, I'm totally a believer of credit where credit's due. Like we don't feel like we should be taking credit for other people's work. So there are some conditions to the open license, but functionally it is, don't use the Cobblepath logo because we put that on our official stuff, and don't pretend you're official. There is a piece of text in the open license that we would like you to copy paste into any of your stuff, which is essentially Locust belongs to us. It is a maker, is us. You can get it on itch. Like, that's functionally what it says. And basically just like don't pretend it's official, and don't reprint any of the stuff from our core book within reason. Like, you're allowed to sort of like take stuff like rules and things if you're changing them or if you really need to reference them, but you can't take huge chunks of our book. Basically, release what you want, make stuff, change the game, do whatever you like, just don't make the core books redundant. We would like people to still buy the core books from us, please, because we designed the thing. That's the cut and dry of it, pretty much. But if you do want to make something, please read the open license. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in contact with us. We're happy to explain it. But mostly, for the most part, people are free to make stuff, and you do not have to pay us money for that privilege.
That is so
Would
cool.
prefer if you have bought the book. So yeah,
that's incredible.
Hopefully,
I didn't know that was a
there'll be
thing.
some really cool stuff coming from that. We're hoping to run a game jam for Locust later in the year on itch for people to make stuff, stories or content or sample items or rules hacks. I'm sure that people are going to do stuff with the system that I'm like, what? Why are you doing that? And it will still be awesome if they do. That'll be amazing. But yeah, like we're hoping to do a game jam for it, and far in the future. I say far in the future. It might be later 2021. We're in 2021 now. Might be later in 2021. We're hoping to do at some point a Kickstarter for a compendium of like stories written by a lot of different people. Particularly, we want to get people from around the world, because we think that would be really cool. And I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff and stories that can be told that me and Steph, as two white British people, are not in the position to tell. We don't have the experience to tell them nearly as well as anyone else could, or at all. And I would absolutely love to see other people making those stories. And so something that we would like to do either later this year or potentially next year, is do a Kickstarter to see if we can get like a big compendium of Locust pre-writ stories from TTRPG writers from around the world. And it doesn't even have to be like, I'm not even going to mandate there has to be anything to do with where they're from or their personal struggles or anything to do with that. It can just be whatever story they feel like writing. But I'd love to have loads more voices sort of like represented, and if we can kind of throw our weight behind that and get it released as a book and as an official thing, I think that would be really cool, and I'd love to do it. Yeah,
That is
that's
awesome.
dreams. Hopefully it will happen. I mean, I've got enough connections. I'm sure I can convince some people to get involved.
I would love to see that happen. And congratulations on the release of Locust today,
Thank you.
February 6th. And whenever you guys listen to the recording, it's ready. It's ready to go. You can get your hands on it.
Yeah.
And now you did mention, I know this isn't the focus of your 1v1, but did you want to quickly give a little synopsis of Coffee and Chaos to kind of pique people's interest?
So, Coffee and Chaos is our next game after Locust. It's going to be on Kickstarter either end of March, but probably April now. We've had some sort of like delays with things that are probably pushing it back, but that's fine. It is a very different beast to Locust. It is a super rules light comedy game about running a cafe. It is going to be printed on a menu. So it's only going to be like 6 sides on a big glossy nice menu. It is going to have stuff like the character cards are like name badges. The cafe, you spec your cafe as well, so your cafe has some like stats. Your cafe is going to be on like a whiteboard, like a sort of soup of the day type board. It's very silly. It's basically like an episode of a sitcom. Essentially, your set of characters is running a restaurant or a cafe or a bar or whatever kind of establishment you want it to be, and things are constantly going wrong. And when things go wrong, more things go wrong. And it's very silly and it's very funny, and it's all just about kind of like exploring character reactions to stupid situations. It's very short and quick, and it's kind of designed to be used with pre-existing groups of characters. So it's kind of designed almost as like a holiday episode game. Like,
That's so
hey,
cool.
it's the Christmas episode. Let's do one where our D&D party's running a bar for some reason. Hey, one of our players isn't here, so we can't do the normal session. Let's do our cyberpunk group running a cocktail bar. And it can be alternate reality or it could be in your world. Like, it doesn't have anything that kind of contradicts or restricts characters from being able to do what they do in other systems. Because all of the rules and the ways that you build characters are based around how they approach problems rather than what they can do. So also it uses cutlery as its conflict resolution. So you don't use dice. Instead, you use knife, forks, and spoons. Which was
That's
actually where
great.
the idea for the game literally was just, I think it would be really funny to have a game printed on a menu that used knives, forks, and spoons. How can I make that? And then we did. And we're pretty pleased with it. It's really funny. Like, it's silly. It's not like a deep emotional. I mean, it's fairly emotions high because you're going to be laughing. Hopefully, I hope people find it funny. We found it funny. Oh no, but it's not like some deep pathos-ridden, long-running campaign kind of game. As awesome as those are, that is not what we have made with Coffee and Chaos. So for example, the first session we did with our some of our superhero characters. It also doesn't have a DM, so everybody plays.
Oh, okay.
So we did it with our superhero characters, but our DM played one of his favorite NPCs from our superhero campaign. And they were all running this crappy little juice bar. No, it was a coffee bar. It was a coffee bar, and the first thing that happened was the coffee machine broke. So it immediately got rebranded as a juice bar because we couldn't make coffee anymore. Lots of things happened, like the in-universe equivalent of Superman was visiting for the day. So the characters were a mix of sucking up really hard to him and trying desperately to avoid him and being really crap to him. And yeah, it all got very, very terrible, and we flipped it uses cards to determine scenarios. We flipped the card that meant that a wild animal was in trying to steal food. So we decided that wild animal would definitely be the character that we know that turns into animals. So that character, who's called Animal Lass, in her bear form, had decided to come in and plunder our cafe. And we didn't manage to stop her. She got all the food. And then my character tried to sell the cafe to the delivery driver, and the delivery driver wasn't buying it. Half of it was covered in graffiti. Things were on fire. I don't think we had a working appliance in the place by the end of the day. It was fantastic. It was excellent. And it's characters interacting with characters and responding to situations. And that's the kind of like the meat of the game. But it's just really silly fun. And it can be played with new characters, but it works really well with an established party with like a dynamic where they can bounce off each other really effectively. I'm hoping people will like it. We've had a few playtesters play it, and a couple of actual plays kind of like take it away and have a go with it, and they've said that they really like it, so that's good. And we've got some amazing artwork for it as well, that we managed to commission. So like it's gonna look great at the very least.
It sounds great. It sounds hilarious. It sounds like a comedy I would love to watch.
I hope, like, I think it's going to be one of those ones that hopefully, if actual plays do it, it will be really funny to watch. Yeah, and we've had a lot of fun with it, and I think it's going to have a lot of fun sort of things. Also, the Kickstarter has stickers. And not just stickers to stick on things, but also stickers to stick on your character cards. Like stickers
Nice.
to do the things. Yeah, stickers are great. I'm way more excited about the stickers than I have any right to be. But stickers are great.
They're fun. They're so fun.
Yeah, I love stickers. They're great, and we couldn't do them for Locust. They're too fun for Locust.
They're too fun. So it sounds like you have something for everybody. It sounds like you're trying to create such a variety of games. We have Locust, which
Yeah.
is horror, and then Coffee and Chaos, which is a little on the lighter side.
Yeah. Well, I've had a couple of people kind of go, oh, so what's your next horror game? I'm like, I'm not making another horror game. I made my horror game. Locus is the horror game that was within me. It's there. I don't need to make another horror game. I've made the horror game that I was going to make. And I think like we're not going to stop making stuff for Locus. I mean, we've got the Zine Quest, which is a one shot for it that's happening in February, like this month. It is followable on Kickstarter right now, but I'm going to be doing like loads of actual proper like announcements for it on Twitter and stuff in the coming weeks, focusing on the fact that Locust launched today right now. But yeah, like I don't need to make another horror game because we're really pleased with Locust, and Locust is doing what we want in horror. So yeah, let's make other things. And we've got ideas for other things. We've got some very strange, weird ideas for other things coming in the future, potentially. I mean, as I say, the big one that we're thinking of doing is very large, like full AAA release size game.
Ooh.
So not something that we can just kind of like throw out there. We're going to need to make sure that we are confident we can complete the Kickstarter, and we will want to get some art up front and stuff, so we need some capital to start. But yeah, that one's racing, sci-fi racing. I don't know if you've seen the film Redline.
I haven't.
It's an anime film.
Okay.
It's about racing. It's mental and it's awesome, and I totally recommend it. I don't think it's very easy to find to buy, but it is on YouTube for some reason. But that's really cool. It's not a Redline game, but Redline's kind of like an inspiration for it, as is stuff like Wacky Races.
Okay, Wacky Races.
Kind of like sci-fi Wacky Races, but a little bit less Cartoon Network. Like it's not super Cartoon Networky, but it's got that kind of like, you are a character, you will have your own special car that you design and stuff. We haven't figured out all the specifics or anything about it really, other than it's like super sci-fi, it's racing. And we've got some like tricks up our sleeve to make that work, because racing is difficult due to the fact that everybody's against each other. And having everybody around a table trying to win isn't necessarily a invalid dynamic, but it does kind of lend itself better to board games than tabletop RPGs. Like it's very difficult to role play that over a large period of time, and you end up with a situation where the outcomes of stories are very heavily dependent on dice and things, because everybody's trying to win, so you kind of fall back on the game mechanics to decide who wins, because that's what conflict resolution's for. So we've got some interesting ideas that I won't go into because it's not something I'm looking to announce right now. But we've got some interesting ideas around that. So and how to twist things so that it's not quite working like that. But that's an idea. We've got lots. We've got more than enough Locus like story ideas as well. Like and we've got the sci-fi guide coming out as well, which I should probably mention at some point in this. Stretch goal for the Kickstarter was a sci-fi guide for how to make Locust sci-fi.
Okay.
And the key thing is that actually, mechanically, like rules-wise, there's not really anything you need to do. Locust will just work sci-fi with the rules as in the books. But it's like a lot of guidance and sort of like inspirational stuff for like sci-fi versions of Locuses. And we're really proud of it, actually. Like we set it out as a stretch goal. We thought, oh, that would be a cool thing. And we had some other ideas for other ones. We had a World War I one and an ancient world one, like ancient Greece, Mesopotamia sort of thing. We didn't reach those ones, unfortunately. Might produce them in the future. We'll see. But we reached the sci-fi one, and we thought, oh, this will be cool. And then we wrote it, and we were like, man, this is legit, like the best thing we've written. Like, we're really pleased with the Sci-Fi Guide. So it's gone to editing. It's come back to us, and we haven't gone through the edit yet because we were releasing Locus. It will be making its way to our backers that have paid for it. In a couple of months' time, it needs to be laid out fully, and getting sort of the main Locus books to the printers and stuff is a higher priority than that. But we got loads of time on it because I think we planned to deliver it around about the time that we were delivering the physical books of Locus. So April we're expecting. So that will be out in April. It will go to our backers, and then it will be up on itch to buy. I think it'll be about £15, $18 ish, but it's not set in stone. So we'll see how much that ends up being. But it's essentially like a fairly chunky little book about how the ideas of horror adapt to sci-fi and how you can specifically adapt them to a Locus game. But it also kind of gives a lot of advice for non-Locus sci-fi horror as well, if you wanted to run it. And it's got some cool stuff like, so one of the things in Locus that I think people are going to really like, I hope, is that the monsters, every haunt comes linked to a vice.
Okay.
And the vices, there's 4 vices, and the vices are linked to the card suits. So you have diamonds is temptation, spades is apathy, clubs is discord, and hearts are malice. And these are essentially like the driving force behind the haunt, and behind the event that went wrong, behind your character's actions that led to whatever that was. So, for example, I had a character who his haunt was that he had a single mum, and he was looking after her, and then he left home to go to university, which is not necessarily a bad action. But he left his mum alone to do it, and that preyed on him. That was his haunt, was that he left home. And his was a thing with haunts is they can be pretty much all of them. I think his was a Discord haunt, because Discord is about breaking up communities and not being interested in other people, and sort of like fracturing bonds and connections. And each of those vices has a bunch of symbology that we've attached to it that directors can use to create monsters based on those vices, and sort of guide them. So, like, I'm not going to go through all of them, but like stuff like temptation has a lot of sort of very like warm, hot, desirable imagery. You've got things like gold and temptation, obviously. You've got things like Malice has a lot of quite violent stuff. Discord has stuff like many faces. Is like one of the things, and they're bits that you can build monsters out of. The Sci-Fi Guide has a completely alternate set of them, where those 4 vices take on quite different existences in a sci-fi universe. They all twist in a really interesting way. So there's that to look forward to in the Sci-Fi Guide, where you've got those 4 vices and they are very different. So an example to whet people's appetite, I guess. Malice in the original is very hot, violent, bloody. It's all sort of like violence and viscera and things. In sci-fi, it is cold and it is corporate. Because the most efficient way to be terrible to people because you want to be terrible to them and because you hate them in a corporate sci-fi universe is to do it through systemic means and corporations and bureaucracy. And we thought, oh, that's really cool, because it's a complete inversion of a lot of the symbology, but it's still got that same core of why it exists and what it means. And the others are similarly quite interestingly different. So there's that, and there's a lot of meat there as well for other people to do some really cool stuff with it. I'd be really interested, like I'd be wildly interested to see some people from different cultural backgrounds take the vices and apply symbology from their cultures, because we've tried to kind of like build stuff from the wider sort of scope. We're not just going on, it's not a British mythology horror game, it's supposed to be kind of general, but we're also not trying to make it, we haven't tried to draw from stuff that we don't know much about. So I would love to see what people with other cultural backgrounds do with that symbology, do with that kind of monster building stuff, and how that changes. And it might be very subtle, and then might be some people where it's like completely different, and that would be so cool to see. So yeah, like I want to see other people make stuff. That's what I'm really excited about. I want other people to make things.
I want to see that too. I want to see everybody's ideas, and everything you've talked about just sounds so fascinating. And thank you for explaining tabletop RPGs for my benefit and for any listeners' benefit who may not be as familiar with them.
My pleasure. I like doing that.
Well, did you want to give a plug to your Twitter and the website again, just in case people missed it earlier?
Yeah, sure. So best place to keep up with stuff is on Twitter. If you follow me, you'll get lots of stuff, like lots of different things. I'm at Crusading. But if you only want news about like the games and things and occasional retweets of other people's really cool looking projects, then follow Cobblepath, which is at Cobblepath. Or alternatively, follow both. Why not? We also have a website, which is www.cobblepathgames.co.uk. And you can find Locus currently on itch.io. I think if you type in Locus, it will hopefully come up. I haven't actually tested it yet. But a link to it's in our pinned tweet on Twitter, if you've got Twitter. And there will be a link to it on our website, but we haven't quite updated that yet. So that will be there in the next couple of days. It will be available on drive-through some point in the next couple of weeks. Drive-through takes a while to manually check everything that gets uploaded to it. So we haven't actually uploaded and sorted that out on drive-through yet, but when we do, it's out of our hands how long it takes before it's actually available. But it will be coming to drive-through at some point in the future, in the very near future. But currently it is on itch, and I think it's slightly cheaper on itch because we have to put it in dollars on itch, and I think the exchange rate makes it like a tiny bit cheaper.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's $32 on itch. It's going to be £25 on drive-through, and I think $32 is a little bit less than £25. So I think it's ever so slightly cheaper on itch. Honestly, if you want an advisory of which one to buy it on itch. It's better than drive-through, and it supports developers much better than drive-through does.
Oh, I learned something new today. Thank you for that, Jack.
Drive-through takes a very huge cut of developers' money, and it's like a big corporation that stuff gets dropped to the, like, it's very easy to lose visibility on drive-through. They're not an evil company, but they're very much a big corporate thing. If you really don't like itch and you want to buy it on drive-through, amazing. Like, I just happy to see people getting my game and hopefully enjoying it. But preference, it's slightly better for most developers if you buy it on itch. They take a much smaller cut, and I think we actually have autonomy to choose how big a cut they take. So we can actually set it to 0. We haven't, because we like itch.io and we're happy for them to take some of our stuff. But they're also just a really good community that has a lot of very talented TTRPG creators on it, who often get swallowed in drive-through a lot easier. So, and itch does a lot of like really cool bundles as well. You get like charity stuff on itch a lot more commonly. And people do game jams on there as well, where you get like some really cool stuff. So of people making things to things. Also, I guess I should plug this. Actually, that would be silly not to. I have an itch as well, a personal itch, because I'm also a personal developer. Aside from Cobblepath, Crusading on the itch somewhere. I have 2 games on there at the moment. One of them is a starter story for Locus, which I made for a game jam last year. It's about investigating a deserted lighthouse. Yep, it's not technically an official Locus story because it's not got the Cobblepath logo on it. It's not. It was made pretty much entirely by me. It's all got like sketch art by me. It's laid out poorly by me. It's not got an editor. So it's not an entirely like completely full-on product to the level that Cobblepath would produce. But it is made by the developer of Cobblepath. So yeah. And I think it's pretty cool. It's got some cool monsters in it, at least. And also, I've got a free game called Heroes of Hyrule, which is a Zelda TTRPG that I am in the process of making. It is very large and will take a while, but it is fully playable already. There are enough rules to play it. It's just got stuff missing and like explanations of how to roleplay. If you need to roleplay, get someone who knows roleplay before you play Heroes of Hyrule. I haven't written that bit yet. But it's free. Check it out. Like, I think it's kind of cool. I think it's a better way to play Zelda RPG than D&D is. There are some other free Zelda RPGs out there. Mine's a lot more what we call crunchy. Which means it's got a lot more rules, basically.
Okay.
It's a lot more complex rules-wise, which some people really like, some people really don't. There's a couple of other really cool ones that are very rules-light. And if you don't really like rules, and you'd rather just do the role-play stuff, and you don't want to mess about with like builds and powers and stuff, my one probably isn't for you. But if you do like the idea of like making character builds and like balancing stats and having lots of different stats and having your character be very mechanically gameplay wise different to others, my one might be for you. Also, you can buy light magic and fire the lasers that Guardians fire from your
Very
hand.
cool. Oh,
Yeah.
so exciting.
And you can play Koroks, which I don't think all the others have. Some of them do, I think, but you can play a Korok.
Oh my god, I love it. Oh, that's so exciting. I'm a big Zelda fan here. So thank you, Jack. You have been a wealth of information. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing the background, everything. I'm just so excited, and I wish you all the best of luck. Please keep in touch with us, and
yes,
if you have other games you want to talk about, let us know.
Amazing, thank you so much. And just like to anybody watching, by the way, like I'm open. Like, message me if you want to ask me questions and talk to me and stuff. If you're rude, like really rude, I will just block you. It's cool. Just don't be rude, but like feel free to reach out, ask me questions, talk to me. So we're nice like that. It might take me a few days to get around to it, but we're nice like that. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a real pleasure.
It was so much fun. And you guys can find Boss Rush Games wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are listening but you would like to see our faces, you can check out the YouTube channel. Until next time, everybody, thank you so much. Bye.